Stop reading. That is not a translation exercise. It is a countdown. The words echoed across the Grand Archive Hall before anyone even realized the quiet human exchange student had spoken. My name is Commander Soraya Vin, Senior Instructor of Military Linguistics at the Orion Strategic Academy. And until that moment, I believed every civilization had something valuable to teach, but none could rival our understanding of ancient languages. Humanity had only recently entered the Galactic Union. Their history seemed short, their influence modest, and their academic achievements insignificant beside civilizations that had explored the stars for thousands of years. Ethan Cole did not look extraordinary. He stood a little over 6 feet tall, wore the plain dark academy uniform issued to every exchange student, and watched the ancient stone tablet from the back of the lecture hall with the quiet patience of someone waiting for an obvious mistake. Professor Walter Pierce proudly activated the final translation sequence after decades of research involving more than 4,000 specialists from 60 worlds. The audience applauded as glowing symbols slowly appeared above the weathered stone. The Academy translation system confidently labeled the opening sentence as a ceremonial greeting welcoming scholars into an ancient library. Ethan sighed almost silently. Then he delivered the sentence that stopped every conversation in the room. That is not a greeting. You just started the countdown. Before anyone laughed, the stone answered him. Every light inside the chamber dimmed at once. The elegant holographic displays disappeared, replaced by deep crimson illumination spreading across the walls. A low ancient tone rolled through the enormous hall while unfamiliar symbols rearranged themselves across the floating projection. Seconds later, even the Academy translation intelligence hesitated before displaying a single line in Galactic Standard. Archive protocol initiated. 60 minutes remaining. The applause vanished. Students exchanged confused looks, while faculty members rushed toward the control consoles. Professor Pierce repeatedly attempted emergency shutdown procedures, but every command returned the same response. Authorization denied. Captain Eric Lawson entered with Academy security only moments later, sealing every entrance as portable scanners surrounded the artifact. No damage could be detected. No outside interference could be identified. Every diagnostic concluded the same impossible result. The countdown was authentic. Cadet Rovan Krell looked directly at Ethan with open suspicion. Convenient timing, human. You waited until after the activation to pretend you understood the language. Ethan never looked offended. He calmly answered, I was hoping someone would notice the punctuation before finishing the sentence. Laughter spread across several rows of students. Rovan stepped forward immediately. Then explain it. Ethan pointed toward a small symbol almost everyone had ignored. That mark does not separate ideas. It separates permissions. You translated only half the instruction. Professor Pierce frowned. That interpretation has never appeared in any database. Ethan nodded. Because everyone has been translating individual words instead of the structure. Before another question could be asked, four ancient Guardian drones emerged silently from hidden compartments surrounding the chamber. They moved with perfect balance, surrounding the stone without threatening anyone. Captain Lawson ordered security drones into defensive formation. Modern tactical units immediately positioned themselves between the Guardians and the audience. Rovan smiled confidently. Finally, something practical. He activated the Academy's standard tactical interface and issued accepted command phrases based on the official translation. The security drones advanced exactly 3 feet before every control signal vanished. They simply stopped responding. The ancient Guardians remained perfectly still. Ethan quietly watched both groups of machines. You just introduced yourselves as unauthorized operators. Rovan shook his head. Machines do not understand introductions. Ethan walked toward the edge of the security line despite repeated warnings to stop. Every eye followed him. He stopped several feet from the nearest Guardian and calmly spoke a single sentence in the forgotten language. The response was immediate. The 4 Guardians lowered their heads in perfect synchronization before moving aside, creating a clear path toward the ancient tablet. Above the artifact, a new line of symbols appeared before translating itself without assistance. Returning instructor recognized. Educational protocol restored. Complete lesson required. 59 minutes remaining. The room became completely silent. Nobody looked at the stone anymore. Every person in the academy was looking at the human. 56 minutes remained when the ancient guardians quietly withdrew from the center of the chamber and formed two perfectly straight lines leading toward the stone tablet. No alarm followed. No threat appeared. That frightened me more than any display of force could have. Every emergency protocol inside the Orion Strategic Academy remained active, yet none of our systems could explain why machines older than recorded history had willingly accepted a human they had never met. Captain Eric Lawson ordered another complete systems analysis while security specialists surrounded the newly opened pathway. Every report repeated the same impossible conclusion. The Guardians were no longer operating under Academy authority. They were following a different chain of command. Ethan Cole remained completely still. He did not step toward the artifact, nor did he show the slightest excitement. He simply watched the glowing symbols drifting above the tablet as though waiting for them to finish speaking. Professor Walter Pierce finally broke the silence. "If you understand what is happening, then explain it." Ethan answered without looking away from the floating script. "The lesson has not started yet. This is only the attendance check." Confused whispers spread across the chamber. Cadet Rovan Krell laughed openly. "Attendance? You expect us to believe an ancient archive is taking attendance after 10,000 years?" Ethan calmly nodded. "Not attendance for students. Attendance for instructors." Before anyone could challenge him, another line of symbols slowly appeared above the countdown. The Academy translation. Intelligence immediately attempted to interpret the message, but every projected translation contradicted the previous one. Some displays called it a warning. Others labeled it an activation sequence. Several systems simply reported insufficient context. Ethan quietly shook his head. "Every translation is wrong because you keep reading individual words." Professor Pierce frowned. "Then what are we supposed to read?" Ethan pointed toward the empty spaces separating the symbols. The pauses. In this language, silence carries instructions. Captain Lawson decided he had heard enough. He ordered 2 Academy drones to approach the artifact and isolate it inside a portable containment field. The drones advanced only a few feet before the nearest Guardian gently stepped into their path. There was no collision and no aggressive movement. The Academy drones simply lost synchronization, rotated in place, and slowly returned to their original positions as though they had received new orders. Lawson stared at the control display in disbelief. "They just rewrote my command sequence." Ethan quietly corrected him. "No, they corrected your grammar." Rovan immediately stepped forward. "If grammar controls these machines, prove it." Without waiting for approval, he activated the Academy tactical simulator built into the lecture floor. Dozens of training drones rose from concealed compartments and entered formation around the chamber. Rovan confidently transmitted the command phrases recognized by every military language course in the Academy. The drones formed a defensive wall exactly as expected. Several instructors nodded with satisfaction. Then Ethan spoke a single sentence in the ancient language. Every Academy drone immediately abandoned its previous formation and reorganized into a perfect circular escort surrounding the stone tablet instead. The tactical interface displayed a message no modern programmer had written. Instruction supersedes defense. Educational protocol restored. Rovan repeatedly attempted to reclaim control, but every command was politely rejected. Ethan finally turned toward him for the first time. "You ordered them to protect an object," he said calmly. "I instructed them to protect a lesson." The distinction seemed impossibly small, yet every machine inside the chamber had understood it immediately. At that moment, another hidden section of the floor slowly opened beneath the ancient tablet. A staircase descended into darkness while soft white lights illuminated each step one after another. Above the entrance, the forgotten language translated itself without assistance. "Continue the lesson below." 54 minutes remaining. The staircase did not descend into darkness for long. After nearly 100 feet, the walls opened into a chamber so enormous that the Academy maps had never hinted at its existence. Rows of floating crystal structures stretched farther than I could see, each surrounded by faint streams of light that flowed like silent rivers through the air. Nothing resembled a military fortress. Nothing resembled a prison. It looked like the largest classroom ever built. The countdown continued above us, now showing 52 minutes remaining. Captain Eric Lawson ordered a reconnaissance scan before anyone moved farther inside, but every sensor returned incomplete information. Distances changed every few seconds. Doorways appeared and disappeared. Even the architecture refused to remain consistent. Professor Walter Pierce whispered that the chamber might be responding to our presence. Ethan Cole quietly corrected him. It is responding to our choices. The difference sounded insignificant until the floors shifted beneath us. Hundreds of glowing pathways spread across the chamber like an enormous puzzle, each leading toward different crystal archives suspended in the distance. Every instructor immediately began debating which route appeared safest. Rovan Krell confidently selected the widest path and stepped forward without hesitation. The moment his second foot touched the illuminated surface, the entire route dissolved into thousands of floating symbols before rebuilding itself somewhere else. He found himself standing exactly where he had started. Frustration crossed his face. Several other instructors attempted different routes with identical results. Every logical solution failed within seconds. Ethan remained where he was, studying the empty spaces between the glowing pathways instead of the pathways themselves. I finally asked the question everyone else had been avoiding. "What are you looking at?" He answered with the same calm voice that had somehow become more unsettling than panic. "Everyone keeps following the sentences. Nobody is reading the punctuation." Before anyone could respond, Ethan stepped onto a section of floor that appeared completely inactive. There was no visible bridge beneath him, yet a narrow path of soft white light formed under each step only after he committed to moving forward. The chamber was not revealing the correct route in advance. It was creating the route in response to the correct decision. Captain Lawson ordered several Academy drones to duplicate Ethan's movement exactly. The machines calculated every step with perfect precision, but after only a few yards they stopped, surrounded by swirling symbols that refused to stabilize. Ethan glanced back without slowing. "They are copying movement," he said. "They are not understanding purpose." The words echoed through the chamber, just as the floating crystal structures awakened one after another. Holographic figures appeared inside them, showing teachers standing beside students from civilizations none of us recognized. They were not conducting military exercises. They were asking questions. Every archive contained another lesson instead of another weapon. Rovan refused to accept what he was seeing. He sprinted toward Ethan using a different illuminated path, determined to reach the center first. The floor instantly rearranged beneath him, gently redirecting him into an endless circular route that returned him to the entrance again and again. Ethan never looked back. He simply continued walking until he reached a circular platform at the center of the chamber. As his hand rested lightly on the crystal console waiting there, every floating archive illuminated simultaneously. A familiar voice, unmistakably human, filled the enormous hall with perfect clarity. "Welcome back, instructor. Your students have been waiting a very long time." Every person in the chamber froze. Humanity had not merely visited this place thousands of years ago. Someone from Earth had built the lesson we had just entered. The human voice faded, but its final words remained suspended above the crystal console, as though the chamber itself refused to let them disappear. No one spoke for several long seconds. Every instructor, every security officer, and every student stared at Ethan Cole with the same question, yet none of us seemed willing to ask it aloud. The countdown continued without emotion. 50 minutes remained. Then the chamber changed again. Thousands of crystal archives rotated in perfect synchronization, projecting countless lines of ancient symbols that flowed across the walls like living constellations. Unlike before, the symbols no longer remained fixed. They shifted every time someone moved, every time someone spoke, and even every time someone hesitated before making a decision. Professor Walter Pierce attempted to capture the changing patterns with the Academy recording network, but every recording instantly contradicted the previous one. The language refused to become static. Ethan quietly observed the movement for only a few moments before speaking. "It is listening." Rovan Krell folded his arms. "Languages do not listen." Ethan looked toward the nearest projection. "This one does." Almost immediately, one crystal archive separated itself from the others and floated into the center of the chamber. A circle of soft white light expanded beneath it, revealing an open platform marked by elegant geometric symbols. The Academy Translation Intelligence finally recognized one complete instruction. Demonstrate comprehension through application. Rovan smiled confidently. Finally, an examination. Before anyone could stop him, he stepped onto the platform. The symbols beneath his feet brightened, and dozens of translucent figures appeared around him, each holding glowing fragments of the ancient language. Rovan confidently arranged the symbols according to every accepted translation taught inside the academy. The crystal archive remained silent. A calm tone echoed through the chamber. Response incomplete. Try again. Rovan immediately revised. His answer, then another, then another. Every attempt failed with the same polite response. There was no punishment, no danger, only quiet rejection. Frustration slowly replaced confidence. Professor Pierce volunteered next, followed by two senior instructors whose research had shaped modern galactic linguistic theory. Their solutions differed completely, yet every answer received the identical response. Response incomplete. The archive was not measuring intelligence. It was measuring understanding. Ethan waited until everyone else stepped away before walking onto the platform. He did not rearrange the symbols. Instead, he gently moved one empty space between two groups of characters. Nothing else changed. The chamber suddenly became silent. Every floating archive stopped rotating. The glowing projections froze in place. Then the calm voice returned. Response accepted. Instructional context restored. Several crystal shelves quietly descended from the ceiling, revealing books, star charts, and educational instruments that had remained hidden for thousands of years. I stared at Ethan in disbelief. You only moved an empty space. He smiled slightly. No, I changed who was teaching and who was learning. None of us understood what he meant until the archive projected two translations side by side. The first was the version every civilization had studied for centuries. The second differed by only a single pause, yet its meaning changed completely. We had believed the sentence ordered knowledge to be protected from outsiders. The corrected version invited every willing student to enter. We had spent generations translating authority where the original authors had written responsibility. Before anyone could absorb that realization, another message appeared across every crystal in the chamber. Lesson 1 completed. Proceed to tactical communication assessment. 48 minutes remaining. Somewhere beyond the illuminated corridor ahead, a massive doorway slowly opened, and from within came the unmistakable sound of synchronized mechanical footsteps waiting for the next class to begin. The mechanical footsteps grew louder with every passing second until an entire formation of polished Guardian units emerged from the newly opened corridor. They carried no visible weapons, raised no alarms, and displayed no signs of hostility. Instead, each one projected glowing streams of ancient symbols that drifted through the air before dissolving into countless geometric patterns. The chamber recognized them not as soldiers, but as instructors. Above the entrance, another message slowly translated itself. Tactical communication assessment begins. 46 minutes remaining. Captain Eric Lawson quietly ordered his security team to remain ready, but none of his officers received permission to advance. Their equipment remained active, yet every command requesting tactical authority returned the same polite answer. Educational environment protected. Combat functions restricted. I had spent my career studying military languages, yet nothing inside this place behaved like a military installation. Every defensive system existed only to preserve learning. Ethan Cole walked forward without hesitation while everyone else watched the Guardians assemble into two perfectly balanced groups facing one another across a circular platform. Each Guardian displayed a different sequence of symbols that constantly shifted position. Professor Walter Pierce immediately began comparing them against the Academy translation database, but every result produced conflicting meanings. Ethan barely glanced at the projections before quietly saying, "They are not giving instructions. They are having a conversation." Rovan Krell crossed his arms with obvious frustration. "Then answer it." One Guardian turned toward Ethan and projected 3 symbols followed by a long empty pause. Ethan answered using only 2 symbols and an even longer silence. Every Guardian instantly rearranged its position. Another sequence followed. Ethan replied again. None of us understood what had just happened, yet the entire formation changed after every exchange. It looked less like translation and more like strategy unfolding in real time. Curious, I asked Ethan what the Guardians were discussing. He answered without taking his eyes off them. They are deciding whether everyone in this room understands the difference between winning and teaching. Before anyone could ask another question, the floor transformed into an enormous tactical map stretching nearly 100 yards across the chamber. Hundreds of illuminated markers appeared, representing friendly and opposing fleets moving through a complex network of star systems. The Academy Translation Intelligence confidently labeled the exercise as a battlefield simulation. Ethan immediately shook his head. Wrong again. He pointed toward one tiny symbol almost invisible near the center of the projection. That mark changes everything. This is not a battle. It is a rescue. Rovan dismissed the observation and confidently assumed command of one side using the Academy's standard strategic doctrine. His simulated fleet advanced rapidly, surrounding the objective with impressive precision. The Guardians observed without reaction. Moments later, Ethan accepted control of the opposing formation. He never ordered an attack. Instead, he redirected supply routes, opened escape corridors, and positioned several ships where they could protect civilians instead of chasing victory. The tactical display instantly recalculated every possible outcome. Rovan's fleet remained larger, faster, and technically superior, yet within minutes his forces had no meaningful objective left to accomplish. Ethan had transformed the entire exercise without destroying a single opposing unit. A clear message appeared above the simulation. Mission success achieved. Preservation prioritized over domination. I finally understood why every previous translation had failed. We had assumed the creators valued conquest because our own histories often celebrated victory. They had designed an entire language around responsibility. As the Guardians respectfully stepped aside, one crystal wall slowly became transparent, revealing an immense chamber beyond filled with suspended star maps unlike anything recorded in galactic history. At the center floated a glowing sphere highlighting one small blue world. Earth. The glowing image of Earth remained suspended above the immense star map, while every other world slowly faded into the background though the archive wanted us to focus on only one destination. No announcement explained why. No historical record appeared beside it. The blue planet simply occupied the center of a navigation network that connected thousands of ancient routes extending across the galaxy. The countdown silently continued. 43 minutes remained. Professor Walter Pierce hurried toward the nearest crystal terminal, convinced the hidden archive would finally reveal the civilization that had designed the entire system. Instead of opening historical files, the console displayed a single question. Where is your classroom now? Confused silence filled the chamber. Captain Eric Lawson searched for tactical meaning while the instructors debated whether the message referred to the Academy itself. Ethan Cole quietly looked around the enormous hall before answering in a calm voice. Everywhere someone is willing to learn. The crystal terminal immediately brightened, and another section of the archive awakened. Entire shelves of floating records unfolded from the walls, revealing maps, engineering diagrams, scientific observations, and lesson plans preserved with extraordinary detail. None of the files celebrated conquest. Every document focused on cooperation, preparation, and responsibility. I realized we had entered a place that measured civilizations not by the territory they controlled, but by the knowledge they shared. Rovan Krell refused to accept that conclusion. If humans built this network, why did they disappear from history? Ethan remained thoughtful for several seconds before answering. Maybe they never disappeared. Maybe they stopped announcing where they had been. The response unsettled everyone because no one could immediately prove it wrong. Suddenly, several Guardian instructors moved toward the center of the chamber and projected another interactive exercise into the air. This time no symbols appeared. Instead, hundreds of moving lights represented exploration vessels approaching an unfamiliar solar system. The archive requested a decision before contact could begin. Every senior instructor immediately recommended establishing authority, securing orbital control, and protecting strategic resources before introducing themselves. The Guardians remained perfectly still. Ethan selected a different approach. He ordered every simulated vessel to remain outside the system while transmitting educational databases, medical knowledge, and open communication channels without requesting anything in return. The simulation advanced several years in only a few seconds. The newly discovered civilization willingly invited the explorers to land, shared its own scientific discoveries, and eventually became an equal partner instead of a dependent colony. The archive displayed another confirmation. Trust produces stronger alliances than superiority. I watched experienced military strategists exchange uncertain glances. We had spent generations assuming strength required overwhelming demonstrations of power. This forgotten civilization had apparently measured strength by the ability to create future teachers instead of future subjects. Another crystal platform slowly rose from the floor, carrying an elegant metallic object no larger than a notebook. Its surface displayed the same ancient language Ethan had been reading since the beginning of the examination. Before anyone else could approach it, the object gently floated into Ethan's hands and opened by itself. Every page appeared blank to us, yet Ethan quietly smiled as though he were reading familiar handwriting. "It is not empty," he said softly. "It is waiting for questions." As the final word left his mouth, every illuminated route across the giant star map shifted toward Earth, and the archive announced another message that sent a chill through the entire chamber. Instructor verification accepted. Preparing regional network restoration. 40 minutes remaining. The notebook closed by itself the moment the final words appeared above the star map, and every glowing route extending across the galaxy began pulsing in perfect rhythm as though a heartbeat had returned after 10,000 years of silence. I looked toward the enormous projection expecting worlds to disappear as ancient systems failed with age, but the opposite happened. One dormant archive after another awakened across the map until thousands of points of light filled the chamber. The network had never been destroyed. It had simply been waiting. 37 minutes remained. Captain Eric Lawson immediately contacted Academy Command, requesting permission to transmit the discovery to the Galactic Council. His communication console remained active, yet every outgoing message was politely delayed. Archive lesson in progress. External notification available after instructional completion. Lawson lowered the device in disbelief. Even the communication systems respected the lesson before the emergency. Professor Walter Pierce slowly walked around the glowing map, comparing familiar regions of explored space with the newly revealed network. Entire corridors connecting major civilizations had existed all along, hidden beneath routes we had considered complete. Ethan Cole quietly studied the changing patterns before speaking. "These are not trade routes." I turned toward him. "Then what are they?" He answered without hesitation. "They are teaching routes. Every destination connects a civilization that solved one problem with another civilization that needed the answer." The room became silent once again. We had assumed ancient civilizations expanded by claiming territory. Instead, this network had expanded by sharing solutions. Roving Krell still refused to accept that humanity occupied the center of it. There has to be another explanation. One human cannot possibly understand something that entire academies failed to read. Ethan calmly looked at the glowing notebook resting in his hands. "I am not understanding more than you. I am asking different questions." Before anyone could respond, the chamber suddenly shifted into another assessment. The floating star map dissolved into hundreds of suspended windows, each displaying a different civilization facing a unique crisis. One struggled with failing harvests. Another faced unstable energy systems. A third searched for safe navigation through dangerous space. The archive presented every challenge simultaneously, expecting a single decision. Senior instructors immediately divided the problems according to specialization. Military experts chose defense. Engineers selected technology. Scientists focused on research. The Guardians watched without approving any approach. Ethan did something entirely different. He began connecting civilizations to one another instead of solving the problems himself. The world with advanced agriculture received navigation assistance in exchange for food science. The engineers gained astronomical data from explorers who needed better energy systems. Within moments, every challenge strengthened another instead of remaining isolated. The suspended windows brightened together before merging into one unified projection. Cooperative solution accepted. Independent excellence acknowledged. Shared excellence preferred. I finally understood why the archive kept recognizing Ethan as an instructor instead of a commander. He never tried to become the smartest person in the room. He quietly transformed every room into a place where everyone became smarter together. As the lesson concluded, another hidden chamber slowly emerged beyond the star map. This one contained no books, no crystals, and no machines. At its center stood a simple circular platform supporting a transparent sphere filled with countless tiny points of light. The notebook in Ethan's hands opened by itself once more, revealing words that only he could apparently read. He looked at them for several quiet seconds before lifting his eyes toward me. "The next lesson is not about language," he said softly. "It is about memory." At that exact moment, the transparent sphere illuminated a single name in bright white letters, and every guardian instructor lowered their heads with unmistakable respect. The name was Ethan Cole. The transparent sphere floated upward until it rested at eye level, its countless points of light slowly arranging themselves into an intricate web that resembled both a constellation map and a family tree. No explanation accompanied the display. The archive expected us to understand the pattern on our own. 34 minutes remained. I stepped closer, convinced the glowing name of Ethan Cole had to be the result of some extraordinary coincidence. Instead, the sphere expanded and projected thousands of additional names stretching backward through time. None of them matched any historical records preserved by the Galactic Union. Professor Walter Pierce quickly searched every available database, while Captain Eric Lawson attempted to identify the ancient registry. Every search returned the same answer: no matching civilization found. Ethan quietly watched the projection before saying something that made every instructor stop typing. "You are searching for people. This archive is tracking teachers." The sphere immediately brightened. Hundreds of names shifted position, linking together through moments of knowledge instead of bloodlines or governments. A scientist who had solved an energy crisis appeared beside a navigator who had prevented a colony from becoming isolated. A physician connected to an engineer separated by thousands of years and dozens of worlds. Every relationship represented a lesson passed forward instead of authority imposed downward. Rovin Krell still refused to believe the archive had chosen the human for any legitimate reason. "Then explain why your name is there," he demanded. Ethan remained calm. "I do not think it belongs to me." Before anyone could question that answer, the notebook opened again. Ethan silently read another page before looking toward the glowing sphere. "It belongs to anyone willing to continue the lesson." The archive responded immediately. Ethan's name dissolved into countless particles of light before separating into thousands of empty spaces waiting to be filled. The meaning became unmistakable. The system had never been searching for one legendary individual. It had been waiting for the next generation of instructors, regardless of species. Suddenly, the chamber trembled gently as another assessment began. Around the sphere appeared dozens of simulated delegations from different civilizations, each asking conflicting questions at the same time. One requested advanced technology. Another demanded navigation charts. A third wanted defensive systems before agreeing to cooperate. The room erupted with competing recommendations. Several instructors argued for strict conditions before sharing knowledge. Others insisted that only trusted allies should receive access. Ethan remained completely silent until every argument had exhausted itself. Then he walked to the center of the projection and asked a single question. What problem are they all trying to solve? Every simulation froze. The requests disappeared, replaced by a single shared concern: fear of facing the unknown alone. Ethan reorganized the exchange completely. Instead of granting every civilization exactly what it requested, he connected each one with another that possessed the missing experience. Within seconds, the simulated negotiations transformed into partnerships built on mutual learning rather than dependence. The archive accepted the solution without hesitation. Educational network restored. Regional restoration approved. I realized the greatest strength humanity possessed was not superior technology or hidden power. It was an instinct to build bridges before building walls. The transparent sphere slowly descended into the floor, revealing one final crystal console beneath it. Ancient symbols appeared across its surface before translating themselves into clear galactic standard. Final verification requires witness testimony. The archive was no longer examining Ethan. It was examining the rest of us. The crystal console waited in complete silence, its surface glowing with a single line that no one seemed willing to answer. Final verification requires witness testimony. The countdown continued without mercy. 30 minutes remained. For the first time since the hidden archive had awakened, Ethan Cole did nothing. He did not translate another symbol. He did not offer another explanation. He simply stepped away from the console and folded his hands behind his back as though the examination had never belonged to him in the first place. I finally understood why. Every previous lesson had measured his ability to recognize patterns, protect knowledge, and teach without seeking authority. The last lesson measured ours. Professor Walter Pierce slowly approached the console before stopping only a few feet away. He stared at the glowing symbols for several long moments before quietly admitting, "For decades I believed. Knowledge became valuable only after someone proved ownership. I was wrong." The console brightened slightly. Captain Eric Lawson stepped forward next. "I believed security meant controlling information before anyone else could reach it. I understand now that real security comes from making knowledge impossible for one person to monopolize." Another section of the crystal surface illuminated. Rovin Krell remained completely still, struggling against the pride that had driven every challenge he had made since Ethan first entered the academy. Finally, he walked toward the console and lowered his eyes. "I kept trying to defeat the human because I thought being the best meant standing above everyone else. He never tried to defeat me. He kept trying to improve the lesson." The chamber answered with a warm pulse of light that spread across every crystal archive surrounding us. I realized the system had never been collecting perfect translations. It had been collecting changed minds. Then I stepped forward myself. My voice sounded unfamiliar in the enormous chamber. I believed humanity was another young civilization searching for teachers among the stars. I now understand that humanity never stopped teaching. The lessons simply outlived the memory of the classroom. The crystal console shined brighter than at any point since the countdown had begun. Ethan remained silent until every witness had spoken. Only then did the notebook in his hands gently close. The final page turned by itself without anyone touching it. A familiar human voice echoed through the archive one last time. "If this lesson has reached you, then our greatest experiment succeeded. Languages disappear. Empires disappear. Technology becomes obsolete. Curiosity survives. Never build a civilization that depends on remembering our names. Build one that continues asking better questions." Every guardian instructor lowered their heads once more. The countdown reached 0. Instead of alarms or catastrophe, every clock quietly disappeared. Across the enormous star map, thousands of ancient educational routes illuminated simultaneously, reconnecting worlds that had been separated for countless generations. The archive had never been counting down to destruction. It had been counting down to trust. Messages finally flowed freely beyond the academy as every restored learning network announced its return across the galaxy. No civilization received ownership. No government received exclusive authority. Every world willing to learn received an invitation. As we slowly walked back toward the surface, I looked at Ethan and asked the question I should have asked from the beginning. "Who taught you to read that language?" He smiled with the same quiet confidence that had unsettled me from the first moment we met. "No one taught me the whole language," he replied. "My grandfather only taught me how to recognize when a question mattered more than an answer." Long after the academy returned to normal, historians would write that a human had reopened the greatest archive in galactic history. They would be wrong. Ethan Cole did not reopen the archive. He reminded the galaxy why it had been built in the first place, and from that day forward, whenever new students asked me why humanity earned such unusual respect among the oldest civilizations, I always gave the same answer. They did not become extraordinary because they knew every answer. They became extraordinary because they never stopped learning before everyone else decided the lesson was finished.